In the fading light of a crisp autumn evening, the sleek black limousine glided through the wrought iron gates of the sprawling estate, its engine purring like a contented beast. Jonathan Hale, the self-made billionaire whose empire spanned continents, leaned back against the leather seat, his mind already racing ahead to the reunion he had imagined for years. He had built his fortune from nothing, rising from the dusty streets of a small Midwestern town to command boardrooms in New York and Tokyo. But now, after a decade abroad chasing deals that turned millions into billions, he was finally home. The mansion loomed ahead, a grand Victorian relic he had purchased as a symbol of his success, its turrets piercing the twilight sky. Yet something felt off. The windows were dark, no warm glow spilling from within, no signs of life stirring in the manicured gardens. Jonathan stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel driveway, a faint unease prickling at the back of his neck. He had wired money faithfully every month, ensuring his wife and daughter wanted for nothing. What could have gone wrong? As he approached the side of the house, muffled voices drifted on the wind, pulling him toward the tall privacy fence separating his property from the neighbors. He paused, hidden in the shadows of an ancient oak tree, his heart pounding. There, in the dim light from the adjacent yard, stood his daughter, Emily, once a cherubic child with golden curls, now a gaunt teenager with hollow cheeks and tattered clothes. She clutched the fence, her small hands extended like a beggar's, pleading silently toward a figure on the other side. The woman responding was the neighbor's maid, a black woman in her mid-40s, her uniform stained from a day's labor, her face etched with lines of quiet endurance. She passed a small bundle through the slats, a makeshift meal of bread and fruit wrapped in a napkin. Emily devoured it hungrily, her eyes wide with gratitude mixed with shame. Jonathan's world tilted. This couldn't be real. His daughter, heir to a fortune, reduced to scavenging like a stray, and from the maid, a woman he vaguely recalled his wife dismissing as untrustworthy due to some petty grievance years ago. What hidden rot had festered in his absence? As he watched, frozen in disbelief, the maid glanced around nervously, her actions laced with risk, and Jonathan felt a surge of questions crash over him. What had happened here, and what deeper truth was about to unravel? Jonathan Hale's journey to wealth had begun in the unassuming confines of a modest family home, where his father toiled as a factory worker and his mother scrimped to keep the lights on. From those humble roots, Jonathan had forged a path of relentless ambition, graduating top of his class in business school and launching a tech startup that revolutionized supply chain logistics. His marriage to Victoria, a poised socialite from old money, had seemed like the perfect alliance. Her connections opening doors, his drive building the empire. Their daughter, Emily, born in the glow of early success, was meant to inherit a life of privilege. But as Jonathan's business exploded, demanding endless travel to Asia and Europe, the cracks began to show. Victoria, accustomed to luxury without effort, grew resentful of his absences, her days filled with luncheons and galas that masked a growing emptiness. She managed the household with an iron fist, her prejudices subtly woven into daily life. The staff, carefully selected for their discretion, included a rotating cast of nannies and housekeepers, but Victoria's disdain for those she deemed beneath her often led to high turnover. Particularly, she harbored a veiled racism, quick to criticize workers of color for imagined slights, her comments laced with the casual bigotry of her upbringing. Next door lived the Thompsons, an affluent couple whose estate rivaled the Hales in grandeur. Their longtime maid, Lena, a black woman who had emigrated from Jamaica decades ago, was a fixture in the neighborhood. Lena had raised her own children while tending to the Thompsons' home, her quiet efficiency earning her a place of quiet respect. But Victoria viewed her with suspicion, once accusing her of loitering near the fence and spreading rumors that she was unreliable. Jonathan, distant and preoccupied, had dismissed these as minor squabbles, focusing instead on quarterly reports and mergers. Now, as he lingered in the shadows, the scene before him ignited a fire of curiosity. Why was Emily, at 16, looking so frail? The money he sent should have provided abundance. Private schools, gourmet meals, everything. Had Victoria squandered it on frivolities? Or was there something more sinister at play? He recalled sporadic emails from home, always polished and reassuring, but now they seemed like facades. Lena's act of kindness, slipping food through the fence, hinted at a bond formed in secrecy, perhaps over years of neglect. What had driven his daughter to this humiliation? And why the maid, of all people? A woman from a background so different, facing barriers Jonathan could scarcely imagine. As the night deepened, Jonathan slipped away unnoticed, checking into a nearby hotel to gather his thoughts. He needed answers, but charging in blindly might shatter whatever fragile equilibrium existed. Over the next few days, he observed from afar, piecing together fragments. Emily's school attendance was erratic. Victoria's car often absent for hours. Lena, meanwhile, moved with a grace born of hardship, her days starting at dawn and ending late, yet she always paused at the fence, her offerings a lifeline. The curiosity built like a storm, drawing Jonathan deeper into the web of his family's unraveling. What injustices had flourished in his shadow? The truth, he sensed, would expose not just neglect, but the ugly underbelly of privilege tainted by prejudice. The days following Jonathan's clandestine return blurred into a haze of surveillance and introspection, each revelation peeling back layers of deception that had accumulated like dust in an abandoned room. He rented a nondescript sedan, parking it down the street from the estate, his binoculars trained on the comings and goings. The mansion, once a beacon of opulence, now showed signs of decay. The paint peeling on the shutters, weeds encroaching on the flower beds, the pool covered in a layer of grime. It was as if the house itself mourned the absence of care. Emily's routine emerged in heartbreaking detail. She left for school each morning on foot, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her steps hesitant. No chauffeur, no luxury SUV as Jonathan had envisioned. At lunchtimes, she often skipped the cafeteria, instead lingering near the fence upon returning home, waiting for Lena's signal. The maid, emerging from the Thompsons' kitchen with leftovers disguised as trash, would pass them over with a nod, her eyes scanning for watchers. Jonathan's chest tightened at the sight. His daughter, reduced to this ritual of survival, her frame thinning from malnutrition. Delving deeper, Jonathan hired a private investigator under an alias, feeding him just enough details to uncover the financial trail. The reports came back swiftly, painting a picture of extravagance gone awry. Victoria had indeed received the monthly transfers, millions over the years, but they had vanished into a vortex of bad investments, lavish parties, and a secret gambling habit that had escalated during Jonathan's absences. High-stakes poker nights at exclusive clubs, trips to Vegas masked as charity events. It all added up to a depleted fortune, the mansion mortgaged to the hilt. But worse than the fiscal ruin was the emotional neglect. Emily, left to fend for herself, had withdrawn into isolation, her grades slipping, her spirit dimmed. Yet the investigator's dossier revealed something more insidious. Victoria's racism. Not just a private flaw, but a weapon wielded against those around her. Former staff members, interviewed discreetly, recounted tales of discrimination. A Latina housekeeper fired for stealing a misplaced brooch, an Asian gardener accused of spying without evidence. And then there was the incident with their own black nanny years ago, dismissed after Victoria claimed she was influencing Emily too much with those stories from her culture. The pattern was clear. Victoria's prejudices created a toxic environment, isolating the family further. Lena's story, pieced together from public records and neighborhood whispers, added depth to the unfolding drama. Born in a rural Jamaican village, she had immigrated to the U.S. in her 20s, working odd jobs to support her family back home. Hired by the Thompsons 15 years prior, she had endured her share of microaggressions. The offhand comments about her accent, the assumptions about her education. But Lena persevered, her resilience forged in the fires of systemic inequality. She sent remittances home, funded her siblings' schooling, and volunteered at a local community center, teaching literacy to underprivileged children. It was there, Jonathan learned, that she had first noticed Emily's plight. One afternoon, as Jonathan watched from his vantage point, the pieces connected. Emily, home early from school, approached the fence with tears streaking her face. Lena appeared moments later, not just with food but with a gentle presence, listening as Emily poured out her sorrows. Though Jonathan couldn't hear the words, the body language spoke volumes. This wasn't a one-off act. It was a sustained bond, Lena stepping into the void left by neglectful parents. But why? What drove a woman, already burdened by her own struggles, to risk her job by aiding the neighbor's child? Intrigued, Jonathan expanded his inquiry, visiting the community center under the guise of a potential donor. There, he observed Lena in her element, her voice steady as she guided a group of kids through reading exercises. Conversations with volunteers revealed her history. A survivor of workplace discrimination in her early jobs, where promotions went to less qualified white colleagues, wages docked for minor infractions. Yet, Lena channeled that pain into advocacy, quietly supporting others facing similar barriers. "She's the heart of this place," one volunteer confided, always saying, "Rise above the hate with kindness." Back in his hotel room, Jonathan pored over old family photos, the glossy images contrasting sharply with the reality he now faced. He remembered Victoria's casual slurs at dinner parties, dismissed as jokes, and his own complicity in silence. His success had blinded him to the rot at home, the way privilege amplified prejudice. As the rising tension gripped him, he began tailing Victoria, discovering her afternoons spent at upscale bars, her evenings hosting friends who exploited her dwindling wealth. One night, he overheard her on the phone from a hidden spot near the window, arrangements for another loan, her voice slurred with desperation. But the emotional stakes heightened when Jonathan uncovered Emily's journal, sneaked from the house during a brief incursion while Victoria was out. The entries were gut-wrenching, pages filled with loneliness, hunger pangs described in vivid detail, and admiration for Lena, whom she called my real guardian. "Mom says people like her are lazy, but Lena works harder than anyone," one entry read. "She tells me stories of her home, how she fought to get here. I wish I could be strong like that." The words pierced Jonathan, revealing the injustice not just in material deprivation but in the poisoning of young minds with bigotry. As weeks turned to months, Jonathan extending his business trip to prolong his observation, the tension built relentlessly. He witnessed small acts of cruelty. Victoria berating a delivery driver of color, her voice carrying over the fence. Lena flinching but saying nothing. Then came the day Emily fell ill, her fever spiking from poor nutrition. Lena, noticing her absence at the fence, ventured closer, risking exposure to leave medicine and soup. Jonathan's heart raced as he saw Victoria spot her from the window, her face twisting in rage. She stormed out, confronting Lena with accusations of trespassing, her words laced with racial venom. "Stay away from my property, you thief." Though no physical altercation ensued, the scene underscored the racial divide, Lena's calm retreat a testament to years of enduring such assaults. The investigators' next report escalated everything. Evidence of Victoria's involvement in a local social circle that quietly supported discriminatory policies, like opposing affordable housing in the neighborhood to keep out the wrong element. Lena, it turned out, had once applied for a job at the Hales home but was rejected outright, Victoria later boasting to friends about dodging that bullet. The injustice simmered, building emotional layers, Jonathan's guilt over his absence, anger at Victoria's waste, and admiration for Lena's unyielding compassion. One evening, as storm clouds gathered, the stakes peaked. Emily, weaker than ever, collapsed near the fence, her cries faint but piercing. Lena rushed over, lifting her gently, offering water from her own bottle. Victoria, alerted by the noise, emerged, her fury unleashed in a tirade that echoed through the yards. "Get your hands off her! People like you don't belong here!" Lena stood firm, her presence a shield, but the strain showed in her eyes. The cumulative weight of racial slights, the fear of losing her job if the Thompsons learned of her interference. Jonathan, hidden nearby, felt the tension coil like a spring. He realized this wasn't just family drama. It was a microcosm of broader racial injustices. The way black women like Lena were expected to labor invisibly, their kindness exploited, their humanity denied. His daughter's dependence on her highlighted the failure of privilege, how wealth couldn't buy empathy. As lightning cracked overhead, Jonathan knew confrontation loomed, the emotional edifice cracking under the pressure of revealed truths. The rising arc continued to ascend, each day unveiling more. Jonathan delved into Lena's past via online archives, discovering her activism in the 90s, protesting unfair labor practices in domestic work, where black maids faced wage theft and harassment. She had won a small settlement once, using it to educate her daughter, now a nurse. This contrasted sharply with Victoria's life of unearned ease, her racism a shield against her own insecurities. Emily's condition worsened, her school calling home about absences, but Victoria ignored it, lost in her vices. Jonathan's surveillance captured moments of tenderness between Emily and Lena, shared stories through the fence. Lena teaching her about resilience, about historical figures like Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, countering the biased narratives at home. The emotional stakes deepened as Jonathan grappled with his role. Had his pursuit of wealth enabled this? Was he complicit in the systemic racism that marginalized women like Lena? A pivotal discovery came when Jonathan accessed old home security footage, hacked discreetly. Clips showed Victoria's escalating abuse, verbal lashings at Emily, blaming her for the family's woes, and past incidents where she had hurled insults at Lena over trivial boundary disputes. One video captured Victoria throwing away food deliveries, deeming them unfit, leaving Emily hungry. Lena, witnessing from afar, began her covert aid then, her actions a quiet rebellion against the injustice. The tension mounted as Jonathan planned his intervention, but doubt crept in. What if revealing himself destroyed Emily further? The racial element weighed heavily. Intervening as a white billionaire could seem paternalistic, overshadowing Lena's agency. Yet inaction meant allowing the injustice to persist. As the narrative built, Jonathan reflected on broader societal parallels. The exploitation of black labor in America, from slavery to modern domestic work, where maids like Lena faced discrimination, low pay, and invisibility. Finally, the rising action crested with a storm of revelations. Jonathan learned Victoria had attempted to evict the Thompsons years ago, citing neighborhood standards, a code for racial exclusion. Lena had rallied community support to stop it, her quiet strength prevailing. This inspired Jonathan, but also shamed him. While he built empires, she built bridges. The emotional layers thickened, the stakes life-altering. Emily's health, Lena's livelihood, his marriage's end. The air crackled with impending climax, the injustices laid bare in their raw, unflinching truth. The storm that had been brewing finally broke on a rain-lashed night, the sky unleashing torrents that mirrored the chaos within Jonathan's soul. He had positioned himself near the fence, his coat soaked, unable to stay away any longer. Emily's cries pierced the downpour. She had ventured out in desperation, her fever returning, collapsing against the slats in search of Lena's aid. The maid, alerted by the noise despite the weather, emerged from the Thompsons' back door, umbrella in hand, her face a mask of concern etched deeper by the shadows. Victoria, roused from her stupor inside the mansion, burst through the patio doors, her robe disheveled. Eyes wild with alcohol-fueled rage, she spotted the scene and charged forward, the rain mingling with her fury. "You again! Stealing my daughter with your tricks!" Her words slurred, but the venom was clear, a distillation of years of pent-up prejudice. She grabbed Emily's arm roughly, yanking her back, the girl's weak protests lost in the gale. Lena, undeterred, reached through the fence, her hand steady, offering support. "She's sick. Let me help." But Victoria's hatred erupted fully, her face contorted as she shoved Lena's arm away, the force causing the maid to stumble. In that moment, as lightning illuminated the yard, Jonathan saw it. The scar on Lena's wrist, a jagged line from an old injury, perhaps from a similar confrontation years ago. It symbolized everything: the physical and emotional toll of racism, the way black women bore scars from battles they didn't choose. Victoria raised her hand, poised to strike, her rant escalating to slurs that cut through the storm like thunder. Jonathan could no longer remain hidden. He surged forward, vaulting the low hedge, his presence shattering the scene like a bolt from the heavens. "Stop!" His voice boomed, authoritative from years in boardrooms but laced with raw emotion. Victoria froze, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of her long-absent husband, drenched and furious. Emily, dazed, looked up with a mix of relief and confusion. Lena stepped back, her composure cracking for the first time, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. The confrontation unfolded in a whirlwind of revelations. Jonathan, his voice steady despite the pounding rain, laid bare what he had witnessed: the neglect, the waste, the racism that had poisoned their home. Victoria recoiled, denying at first, then lashing out with accusations of abandonment. But Jonathan pressed on, recounting the financial ruin, Emily's suffering, and Lena's selfless interventions. As the words flowed, the intensity peaked. Victoria, cornered, admitted her prejudices in a burst of defiance, claiming people like her had no place in their world. It was the breaking point, the raw exposure of injustice that had simmered for too long. In the heart of the storm, Jonathan turned to Lena, his apology profound, acknowledging not just the immediate harm but the broader systemic failures she represented. Emily, clinging to him, whispered her thanks, her frailty underscoring the drama. Victoria, defeated, slumped against the fence, the rain washing away her facade. The climax crested as Jonathan declared his intent to end the marriage, to rebuild, to honor Lena's kindness. Lightning flashed one final time, illuminating the shattered family, the maid's quiet dignity standing tall amid the wreckage. In the aftermath of that fateful night, the estate transformed from a symbol of decay into a hub of renewal, the storm's cleansing rain marking the end of one era and the dawn of another. Jonathan wasted no time, filing for divorce the next morning, the proceedings swift given the evidence of Victoria's mismanagement and abuse. She left with a settlement, enough to start anew but stripped of the mansion and the illusions of superiority. Her departure was quiet, a shadow slipping away, leaving behind echoes of the prejudices that had defined her. Emily's recovery became Jonathan's immediate focus. He enrolled her in a top medical facility, where doctors addressed her malnutrition and emotional trauma with care. As she healed, father and daughter rebuilt their bond, long walks in the garden becoming rituals of honesty. Jonathan shared stories of his own struggles, admitting how his ambition had blinded him to the home front. Emily, in turn, spoke of Lena's influence, the lessons in empathy, the tales of overcoming adversity that had sustained her through the dark years. Lena, initially wary, found herself drawn into the fold. Jonathan approached her with respect, offering not charity but partnership. He learned of her dreams, expanding the community center, providing scholarships for youth facing barriers similar to those she had overcome. With his resources, he funded these initiatives but insisted Lena lead, her expertise guiding the efforts. The Maid, once invisible labor, became a community pillar, her story inspiring local media features on resilience amid racism. The broader impact rippled outward. Jonathan, transformed, audited his companies for equity, implementing diversity programs and fair wage policies. He spoke publicly about his awakening, highlighting how privilege often masks injustice, drawing from Lena's experiences without exploiting them. Donations flowed to organizations fighting racial discrimination, his empire shifting from pure profit to purposeful growth. Emily flourished, her education resuming with vigor, infused with the values Lena had instilled. She volunteered at the center, bridging worlds once divided by fences. The estate itself changed, staff rehired with inclusivity in mind, the gardens blooming anew. Years later, as Jonathan reflected on that rainy night, the takeaway crystallized. True wealth lies not in fortunes amassed, but in the humanity we extend. In a world rife with division, acts of kindness across lines of race and class can dismantle barriers built over generations. What if we all looked beyond the surface, challenging the prejudices within? The question lingers, urging reflection. For in every overlooked act of compassion lies the seed of profound change.